Assalamu alaikum and welcome. This is the only way up. And today's topic is Axel Radikubanu and the tragic killing of three young girls and his conviction in court over the last week or so. And before we get into it, show some love by sharing, subscribing, and liking. So, the big question is, how do you prevent something like this from happening again? How did Axel become a young person who needed to get out there and kill young girls, innocent young girls? We've got the right saying, and the Tories jumping on it in blaming a sort of culture. We've got Yvette Cooper blaming Amazon. You got Keir Starmer saying we've got a problem of young people just loving violence for the sake of violence. What's your take on it?
Yes, Uncle Shani, hope you're well. Well, the way you solve this is firstly by not doing everything they've already been doing, by not doing many of the proposals which are based on many prejudiced views. You mentioned some of them: blame Amazon, blame the parents, blame TV, blame computer games, blame immigrants. I think the court verdict was quite interesting. See, the problem you got here, Shani, is the stabbings happened, and unfortunately, these girls died. And what you find was the raw emotion, rather than taking it into a direction, let's investigate it, let's understand it, let's deal with it. What you found was different politicians, the different factions try to use it for their own agenda. So the general trend was is this was some Muslim, he was a terrorist, and he's killed our girls. So immigration is a problem, Muslims are a problem, and the politicians seem to be covering it up. There's some undercover agenda going on here where they're not telling the truth. So obviously, this led to the riots that we saw in the end. In the end, the judge was very clear that this had nothing to do with politics or religion. You had an individual who had a history of violence. There was clearly a problem with this guy mentally, and it's unfortunate that he was not picked up by all the different services and issues that happened. People who were in the same primary school as him talk about how this guy was just unhinged. There was something clearly wrong with this guy. So there's no ideology here. And in fact, he was a Christian. He's not an immigrant. He was actually born here. Actually, it's got nothing to do with Muslims, immigrants, and Islam. But what you find here is, again, the lens through which everyone viewed this through was what the politicians have been pushing, is that we have a problem with immigration, people are not integrating, and a lot of immigrants are criminals. And this was just an example of that. And that's what led to many people going on the streets and the riots that we actually saw. Now, I think there's a few things we have to put into perspective here. That firstly, look, in every society, you do get your outliers. You get people who mentally they got issues and they do things like this. And actually keep these are very small in number that this actually happens. And there's actually very little you can do. You're actually quite unlucky if this happens to you. Then there's a broader issue here where people enjoy violence. People are perfectly normal at one point in their life, and then they start to believe in certain things, or they start to live a certain lifestyle, which can be quite violent. Now, that is something you can deal with because even for someone to adopt this lifestyle, they had to get access to it, they had to see it. And if you look at rap videos, if you look at rap stars, if you look at computer games, all of them glorify violence. If you look, Shani, some of the best films in history, whenever you have the league tables or you have the polls, it's always Scarface and The Godfather. So, these films are looking at a particular lifestyle, the gangster lifestyle. This is so, these things have been glorified. So, what do you actually expect? Then, on the other side, you get many people who growing up, they've grown up in a working class family. For them, the system doesn't quite work for them. They see they've been neglected, they've been let down, and what they've been told by politicians is this is too much money going to immigration. We're being flooded. We're drowning with all these immigrants coming in, and then what you see is many people take a position that the immigrants are a problem. Muslims are a problem, the other is a problem. And that's what can lead to this type of violence. What's interesting is there's no discussion here about 14 years of austerity. There's no discussion here of 14 years of complete failure by the government. There's no discussion here of the last year how the Labour Party has completely messed up the economy, how they've actually just continued with the Tory policy. So a lot of the politicians who promote these ideas about immigrants and foreigners being a problem, a lot of it deflects from their own failure. If you look at the UK, and we're going to throw Brexit into the equation here. Brexit was supposed to be this nirvana. It was supposed to be this utopia that was going to fix everything. 5 years on, it's actually been completely worse. So what you've had here, Shani, is you've got a few different strands which actually need to be separated and understood on their own. What the political class has done with help from the national media is they've muddied the waters so people can't separate between these. So the fact that this individual was not a Muslim, he wasn't an immigrant, he was born and bred in this country. I'm seeing polls even this week, Shani, where at least 50% of people polled still believe that this guy was a Muslim, he was an immigrant, and that's the problem, even though the court case has proven it and even though the evidence is out there. And I'm not surprised because people still believe that the EU was the problem. That I saw someone on TV just this week on the morning chat show, Shani, still saying that our biggest achievement from leaving the EU is we've taken back control. And when they're asked what exactly are we taking back control of, they can't give you one example. So Brexit, immigration, blaming it on foreigners, deflecting from the politicians' failure. These are all issues that need to be understood in their own right, each of them individually. If you don't understand these or you don't appreciate them, what
It's
you will
quite
do is you will
interesting
blur
in
them
terms
and you
of,
think one is a
let's
cause of
look
the
at
other
it.
when actually
Why
that's not
is
the
it
case.
that society is producing people who are violent? Knife crime is up. On the extreme side, you have people who kill children. But domestic violence is up. Football hooliganism is up, though it's not reported much. Bullying in schools is up. Relationships breakdown is up. Every negative marker is up. So we're producing people who want to look after each other, or people who don't care about each other. And the key marker, I would say, is the shepherd. Yeah, so the shepherd, when you look at the shepherd, all the prophets were shepherds. What sort of personality is one of caring, one of consideration, one of looking after? How do we produce a society that can do that? That's the big key question. How is society being raised? How is youth being raised? How is culture being implemented? And even when you look at the euthanasia bill, elderly, okay, they need to go. Care homes, care at home, no one to look after. It's all gone wrong. The whole love, the empathy, the consideration, the people, the relationships have all dropped down to zero, and it's been replaced by gadgets, mechanical, rigid relationships, and you can't survive. The empathy totally goes out the window, and then you get things like reform who add to that and can sit on top of that. So we have to really ask ourselves, how do you build a generation of youth, of children that going forward in these tough times can do it with care, we can do it with consideration, we'll do it with love, won't backstab people, won't betray people, won't harm people. And as a people, as a nation, as a community, this is a big question that needs looking into, because clearly the prevailing ways, the prevailing culture is failing.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, Charlie. This is the level of discussion that needs to happen. What you find is politicians are very quick to blame something else. It's foreigners, it's Muslims, it's immigrants, and that avoids the discussion of what's going on in society. And you quoted many examples of social issues, social problems, the divorce rate, relationships, sexual exploitation, just the culture in the workplace, just the economic situation, especially with austerity for so long. All of these are factors, and these were decisions made locally. These were decisions made domestically. And if this country was a society where the social system was functioning normal, people were living happy, prosperous lives, then you could argue, okay, where does this problem come from? But when you've got so many issues across the different stratas of society when it comes to relationships, then really they need to have a long, deep look at themselves. And interestingly, many people do sense when these things happen that there is a problem. They can't quite put their finger on what it is. And what you find in the discourse, what you get is immigration and these sort of issues, and that muddies the waters. And there is a lot of problem. The fact that domestic violence goes up when the England football team loses a football match is very telling. The fact that so many women are exploited sexually and even mentally, there is a problem in the society. And the assumption here is if immigrants all got up and left, things will be great. But we should have to take into account that 87, 89% of the UK's population is indigenous white. Immigration, despite getting a lot of the media coverage, in terms of proportion of the broader population, even immigration on an annual basis as a proportion of the total population is extremely small. When 87, 89% of the population indigenous white, are you really trying to tell me 10, 11% of the population is affecting 89% of the population? Surely it's the other way around. So these arguments, they all assume that 89% of the population is fine. There's a problem with 10, 11% of the population. Whilst the reality here is there's some challenges and issues with 10% of the population, but there are massive issues across the board with 89% of the population. And again, you know, when you bring in these numbers, you do take away some of the emotion from the discussion. But I think the numbers give a bit of perspective because immigration is completely out of control. This country is being swamped. When you look at the numbers, fine, 1 million people may come to this country every year, but also 500,000 leave every 2 or 3 years. So you have net immigration of 500,000. 500,000 amongst a population of 68, 69 million. Where really is the issue? When you start putting this into perspective, the discussion and the debate really needs to be about the host country, the host population, their policies. What are they doing trying to solve these? Where the failures been? But it constantly goes to immigration, these people that are coming in, and that they're not really dealing with the issue. And these issues will only get worse.
Jazakallah khair for your thoughts, and remember to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.